Hello fellow Unreal Engine games developers. Yes, Unreal Engine 5 is finally here, so I'm going to show you how to create this procedural desert landscape in the new engine. Let's get straight into it. Yes, Unreal Engine 5 is finally here. Last year I showed you how to make this desert landscape using the procedural landmass plugin, but that was in Unreal Engine 4. So today I'm going to update it and show you how to create the desert landscape in Unreal Engine 5. First thing you need to do is create a new project. So open up Unreal Engine 5. I've gone into the game section, choosing a blank project. And over here, I'm targeting it for desktop, maximum quality, no starter content, no ray tracing. And then just give it a project name. So I'm going to call it Desert Landscape and create. And after a few seconds, it'll open up. By default, it will open up this open world template, which we're not going to use, but we'll create a new level in a second. First of all, you'll probably get this message saying project file is out of date. So just click update here. Don't worry about the plugins for now, although we will add a plugin in a minute. First thing we want to do is create a new level. So do file, new level, and I want it to be completely empty. So choose the empty level, create, and straight away let's do Control S and we'll save it. So I'll create a new folder under content called maps, and under there I will call my level desert. Okay, so we now have the empty desert level. Now the first thing I want to do is set up the environment and the lighting, and I want to show you a new way to do this. If you go into Window, Environment Light Mixer, you can just click these buttons to create all the relevant sky and lighting elements. So let's click on Create Skylight, create Atmospheric Light 0, which is your directional sunlight. We don't need to create another one. Create the sky atmosphere. I won't create any cloud because my desert scene is going to be clear sky, and then create a height fog. And if you close this down, you now have the all of the sort of elements here for the lighting. So now let's start to create our landscape. So go into the select mode at the top here and choose landscape. And the most important thing here is make sure you enable edit layers, because we're going to be doing two layers for our desert, a main dunes layer and then a sort of a sub dunes layer to create a little bit of detail in between the main dunes. I've chosen to go with a section size of 127 by 127 and 2 by 2 sections just to create a bit more detail. So just make sure you've got these same resolution. You should have 2033 by 2033 at the bottom here, and just click create. And we now have our landscape, albeit there is no material on it yet. So the next thing we want to do is put some sand on our desert. And Quixel Bridge in Unreal Engine 5 is now built in to the is now built into the engine, to the editor engine. So you can come into edit, window, Quixel Bridge. And if you've not used it before, you'll probably have to sign up or log in. But once you've done that, go into the search bar and search for Bright Desert Sand. And you should find this asset here. So if you click on it, you may have to download it. I've already downloaded it. So click on that button first. And then I've gone for medium quality. That's more than sufficient for this setup. Don't need to go any higher quality on that. So just click on add, and after literally a fraction of a second, you will see in your content browser this new desert sand material with all of the textures associated with it. So close that down for now. We'll come back to that in a minute. Close down the bridge, and now what we want to do is apply that sand to our landscape. So for now, go back to your regular select mode, choose the landscape in the outliner, drag the details down a little bit until you see this landscape material, and then in the drop down here just type in desert and you'll find this MI bright desert sand material. Click on it and we now have our sand material on there. So now we want to adjust the scaling of this sand, but we've got no reference figure to see if this sand is too small, too large. So I think this is probably the time to add in a mannequin just to get a reference figure. So you probably noticed the content explorer isn't shown in Unreal Engine 5 by default, but if you press Control and space, it comes up from the bottom here. And now what we can do is click Add to add a new feature, add a feature or content pack, and we'll choose the third person feature. Okay, so that's now added in here. So you can just close that down. And by default, our game will still be in the default game mode, so it won't have a character. But if you go over to your right hand side and choose world settings, we can change the game mode here to third person game mode. And now if you do Alt P to go into play, there is our mannequin and we can run around on the scene. But if you look at the sand here, it's very detailed. I really want each ripple to be about the width of a foot. It's also a bit difficult to see these ripples, so let's change the sunlight a little bit, have it lower so we can see the shadows of the ripples a bit more. So to come out of the game, normally, again this is a change, in Unreal Engine 4 you'd have hit the escape key. Now you have to press Shift Escape to come out of the game, so do that. And to change our lighting, a quick way to do this is to do Control and L. Keep the Control key held down, and while you do that you can move your mouse and you can see that it moves that light in real time. So bring the light down sort of low in the horizon like this, and now we can see those ripples. So again, if we go into play mode, now I can see those ripples. There's about 10 ripples per foot length, and I want it to be one ripple, so I need to reduce the tiling tenfold. So that's what I'll do next. Let's Shift Escape again to come out, and we will open up our content drawer again. You can click on the bottom or Control and space, and we'll go into our Megascans, Surfaces, Bright Desert Sand, and double click to open this up. It'll probably open up in its own window here. If you just drag the tab bottom, we can then put it side by side with our desert landscape, so we can see as we change the material what effect it has on the landscape. So the first thing I want to do is change the tiling. So click the little triangle here to open up the tiling variables. Make sure you check this tiling and offset. At the moment it's a tiling of 1 and 1. Let's reduce that to 0.1 and 0.1, and now you can see that those ripples are much further apart. While we're in here, the base specular is 0.5. That's quite shiny for this surface, so let's reduce that from 0.5 to 0.1, and you can see that some of the shininess of the sand has gone away. And the other thing you might want to do, it's up to your own taste, is I want to have slightly redder sand, so I'll check albedo tint and I will move it slightly to the red, and you can see that it's gone a bit red. In fact, I'll do a bit more. Yeah, so I've got slightly redder desert texture there. Okay, so save your material instance, close it down. So we've now, let's go into play mode again, just see. Yeah, that's a much better scale. You can see that the foot of the mannequin is around about 1 ripple in length. Okay, so that's the basics done. Now we need to go to the main event of the tutorial, which is creating the desert dunes. So let's come out of here, Shift Escape, and go back. In fact, let's do a quick save. Control Shift S just to save what we've done so far. Go into landscape mode. And when we created this landscape, it created a single layer here. Double click on it and we can call this layer Main Dunes. And we're going to use the landmass material brush to procedurally carve out our dunes. So if you click on you'll be in this sculpt section here. If you click on blueprint and look at your blueprint brushes under tool settings, at the moment there are none there, and that's because we haven't yet enabled the landmass plugin, which we need to use. So to do that, go into edit plugins, type in landmass and select it. It will tell you it's a beta, but that's fine. Just say yes, you want to enable it, and then restart the project. In fact, let's do one thing before we restart the project. Let's come out of here. Let's go into edit project settings. Go to your maps and modes. At the moment, it's going to open up this open world template whenever we start this project. So click on that and change it to your desert level, and also make it the default map for the game as well. Okay, and close that down. This just means that every time you start this or restart this, you'll come back to the desert level. Okay, now let's go back to the plugins, landmass. Okay, select it if it's not already selected and do restart. If you've made any changes like this, save the selected changes before you restart, and shouldn't take long. A few seconds later, you should have the project reopened. Okay, and now we will go back into our landscape mode. We're on our main dunes layer. Choose our blueprint brushes, and now underneath here you've got 3 landmass brushes. The first 2 are spline based, allow you to create shapes or rivers, and the third one is a material brush, which we're going to be using in order to apply a procedural material across the whole landscape. So if you select this one, then you must click on the landscape to apply it. Okay, and you see something's happened there. If you want to move up, right click on your mouse, press the E key. So the Q and E keys while your right mouse button is pressed go up and down, and then you can use WAS and D to move around. You can see that it's created some bumps in the middle of the landscape, and this is because this material is using a default brush called the simple brush. So you can see over here on the outliner, it's created a custom brush here. If I select it and I go down to, let's see, I've got to go back and make sure you go back to details. I'm still in world settings. If you go down to the brush settings under number 1, open up material, you can see that it's got this M simple brush at the moment. That's what's applying these bumps in the middle of the landscape. What we want to use is a noise brush that is included within the engine. So if you click down here and if you search for noise, then you will see various noise ones. Now, if you don't see any noise brushes, and you probably won't the first time you use the engine, it's because you haven't enabled in the settings here show engine content and show plugin content. So make sure that you've clicked these, and then it shows all of the content in the engine, because these noise brushes are in the engine content, I believe. So let's go back here, and the one we want to use here is Gen Noise 01. So select that one, and nothing will appear to have happened, but let's change some of these settings here. Let's change the tiling to 10, and you can see some little bumps have appeared, but the elevation is very low at the moment. And let's put the elevation all the way up to, let's say, 6,000. Okay, and now we've got very rugged landscape, not very desert looking at all. But one other thing we can change here is this octaves. Octaves is the noise amount in the frequency range. So if you change this from 7 to 1, you'll see that these bumps become very smooth and granular. And so if I go into, let's go down a bit here and go into play mode, what we've got here is kind of desert-like, but it's not the sort of desert that I want. If you look at images of places like the Sahara Desert, they're not smooth and bumpy like this. They have ridges that tie the dunes together. So we want to change this noise so that it uses ridges rather than bumps. And there is a noise texture or a noise function called Voronoi that generates exactly the sort of shape we want. So what we want to do is take that Gen Noise 01 and adapt it for the texture that we want. Okay, so let's Shift Escape to come out of play mode. Let's just tidy up here a bit. Let's call this brush here, I'll go to here and F2, and I'll call it Main Dunes Brush, just so we remember which brush is associated with which layer. And now what we want to do is we want to take this Gen Noise and copy it and amend it. So click on the browse to find it here. Drag your Explorer up to the top level, content level, and then drag this Gen Noise 01 material and put it into the content level, and make sure you do copy here. You don't want to move it because you don't want to lose it from your engine content. So click copy here, and now if you click on content, you've got this Gen Noise 01 here. Let's rename it and we'll call it Gen Noise Desert. Okay, and it's saving and doing the shader compilation for that. Okay, now open this up and we're going to make a change. Don't worry about, there's a lot in here. Don't worry about all of the nodes. There's only one that we're particularly interested in, and it's this custom noise. So this is the heart of this material. What it's doing is it's generating noise, and then it's applying that as the height map. And you can see that the type of noise it's creating at the moment is based on this function. If I click on this, it's currently set to 3, which is gradient noise, but the noise we want is Voronoi noise, and they've actually put in the description here 5 equals Voronoi. So let's change that 3 to 5 and save. And then for the next 30 seconds or so, you will have this dialog that says it's applying changes while it's recompiling the shader. So let it go through and do its recompilation, and that'll disappear once it's finished. Okay, and once that's disappeared, you should see the ball turn red on the left here. We can now come out of here, and what we want to do now is go to our brush, our Main Dunes brush, and change it from Gen Noise 01 to Gen Noise Desert. So type desert here, Gen Noise Desert, and you see straight away that we have those classic large desert ridges as we fly around. So this is looking good. Now you could leave it there if you wanted this sort of smooth desert look, but personally I think it's a little bit too perfect. What I want to do is add another layer to the landscape with some sub dunes that break it up. So what we'll do now is we will right click on the Main Dunes layer and do create, and we'll call this new layer, double click, sub dunes. And what I want to do is I want to use my Voronoi noise again, but I'm only going to use a little bit of it on the second layer. So go to our blueprint brush, and choose our custom brush material only. Click on the landscape, and first thing it does is it applies the simple brush, which we don't want. So come over to the brush that's created on the right hand side where it says simple brush, search for your desert, Gen Noise Desert, and apply that. And what you'll notice is that it's gone flat again. We were expecting this to be added on top of our existing existing layer underneath. Let's see if we change the scale. Let's do this. Let's change this to 10. So it's working. Oh, actually, let's make this 5,000 so I can see what I'm doing. It's working, this brush, but it's not applying it on top of the layer. If we zero out everything here, like the elevation and the octaves, we would expect to see this layer underneath. You see, if I toggle the layer visibility, it's still there. So this is because the brush is missing a set of nodes that adds it to the existing height. So we can fix that. So let's leave this for a second. Let's just tidy up before we leave it. Let's rename this brush here, the new brush, to Subdunes brush, even though it's not doing what we want yet. Okay, and now go to your content drawer, open up the Gen Noise Desert. Okay, actually, no, close this down for a second. What we're going to do first of all is open up the content drawer. We want to find the original Gen Noise 01. So if you click on all and search for, simple brush, the one we were using first of all. Okay, and it's this one here, the one that says M_simple brush. It's in the Blueprint Brushes materials. Open that up, and again, this has got a lot in it, but there's a bit that is missing from our current brush, and this is this height render texture. So in the simple brush, what it's doing is it's taking the existing height, unpacking it, and then adding it to the newly generated. Over here, it's actually lerping it, but we can do an add on our existing brush. So take these, come back to these three nodes and do Control C to copy them. Close that down. Then in your content drawer, go to the content level, make sure you click X on the filter so you can see everything. Open up the Gen Noise Desert, and then what we want to do is just near the end here, above this clamp, just do Control V, and what we'll do is we will add, click Add, we'll add what's coming out of this divide node and then plug that into the clamp node. So you'll end up with this. So effectively it's calculating everything, but instead of just going straight to the generated noise, it's adding it to the existing height map before it puts out there. So it should combine the two together now. So let's save, and again wait for 30 seconds or so while it recompiles. Okay, and now it's done. Let's close this down. And let me just, to get this to do something, you just need to put in a new parameter here. So let's put elevation scale of 100. Okay, and immediately we can see we've got the, if we hide the subdunes, we can still see the layer underneath. And then if we click on subdunes, it's still there. So that's good. It's now adding that to it. But now what we want to do is play around with these elements. Let's move up slightly so we can see this dune. And what we'll do is we'll play around with the tiling first of all. So let's make the tiling of the original brush, the main dunes brush, was 10. So if we make this tiling 30, and let's make the elevation, let's try 500. Okay, and can you see what's happened is that what you've now got is in between the main dunes, you've got these sub dunes. They're not elevated as much because our original elevation was something like 6,000. So we're just creating these gentle sub dunes in between. And if you want to, you could also use the octaves to create a little bit of noise in between those dunes as well. So let's change the octaves to 3, for example. And can you see what it's done is it's created a little bit of noise in between. So this may be too much. The only way you'll find out is by going into play mode. So let's do that. Go into play. And it actually looks pretty good to me. So I've still got the general, it might be a little bit intense. It looks maybe slightly rocky. So let's maybe reduce the elevation slightly, but the effect is pretty good. It's broken up the smoothness of the craters in between the dunes. So let's come out of play, and maybe I'll just reduce the elevation scale by half to 250. Yeah, that's much more subtle. And now we're going to play mode. I've still got a little breakup, but it's smooth. It's much more sort of smooth like a desert, while still having a little bit of breakup of the patterns. Okay, so that's all the hard work done. Let's finish off this tutorial by playing with lighting and some post-process effects to really sell the whole desert scene. So I'm going to come out of play mode. I'm going to go back into select mode, and maybe now's time to do a save as well. Control-Shift-S to save. Okay, so I want to start off by looking at lighting. Don't worry about these artifacts, by the way. Sometimes you get those sort of triangles generated while it recalculates. So let's go into lighting first of all. First of all, let's look at our main sun, our directional light. You can change some things here if you want. Obviously, you can change the angle. I often change this Y angle, which is the main one that affects how close it is to the horizon or not. So you might want to change that to say -5 to bring it down a bit, more like sunset. You get slightly redder sand there. The other thing you can do if you want as well is you can go down to the light shafts and enable those. And it's a subtle effect, but what it does is it creates a little bit more contrast. There'll be, if you're in these shady areas, you'll see the light shafts going above the dunes, and it creates a little bit more contrast. So it's up to you whether you want to include that or not. You could even have light shaft bloom. You'll probably have to reduce the scale of it, but again, depending on the effect you're going for. So that's the sunlight taken care of. Let's also look at the atmosphere. So you've got various ray scattering here. There's two types of scatterings. There's atmospheric scatterings, this Rayleigh scattering, and this Mie scattering. So you can play around with those. They have quite an impact. I mean, if you change the Rayleigh scattering to, say, it's 0.03 at the moment, let's do 0.1. It has really changed the redness of the sand and the sky. It might be a bit too much. So 0.5, oh, not 0.5, sorry, 0.05. Okay, that's sort of halfway in between. And the Mie scattering tends to affect sort of the particles that affect the blueness of the atmosphere. So it's 0.003 at the moment. It's very low. If I do 0.01, actually it might be a little bit too low. Let's try 0.1. You can see it's really made it colder and darker and flatter to a certain degree. I don't like that effect so much. Let's go back to 0.03 and have it as a sort of a warm. In fact, even that's a bit too much. I mean, let's do 0.003. Yeah, back where it was. I like that sort of harshness of the shadows. So what else can we do with the main lighting side? Well, let's look at the height fog. So what we can do here is we could create a little bit more depth by having more fog in the distance. So at the moment our default fog density was 0.02. I could change this to 0.1, for example, and that creates a sort of more like a sandstorm in the distance. Let's halve the figure and go 0.05. You can change other things in here as well, like you can change the fog color to make it maybe redder. I won't change it here. The other thing you could try doing is you could try enabling volumetric fog, and you can see that sort of uses the atmosphere, the sky atmosphere, to cast fog details. I quite like that, so I'll leave that on. Okay, so we've improved the ambience of our desert here by changing some lighting and fog effects, and the last thing I want to do today is to put in a post-process volume and do 2 or 3 final effects really to finish off. So I will go into, let's do a quick save. I will go into Window, Place Actors, search for post-process volume and drag that in, doesn't matter where. Now I can shut that Place Actors down, and with that post-process volume selected in the outliner, first thing I want to do is search for INF, infinite extent, and select that. That means that this post-process volume will apply across the whole of the level. Okay, once I've selected that, go out of the search, and now I'm going to look at a few things I could change. So I'm not going to change the bloom. First thing I'm actually going to do is going to clamp the exposure, right? It does this adaptive exposure when you go into the game. Some people like it, some people don't. I personally like to have my exposure clamped. So what I'll do is I'll select my minimum, maximum brightness and make those both a figure of 1. Okay, and you can see that's already darkened the scene a bit. If you want to, you could, if you don't like this to be in this dark, you could pick your directional light, go to the angle here, which is -5, and maybe I'll make it a bit higher, -8. Okay, that's lightened up slightly. I actually quite like it a little bit darker, so maybe -6. Okay, right, back to our post-process volume. So we've fixed the exposure. Let's go down a bit more, and the next thing I want to do, maybe a lens flare. So just tick on the intensity here, and I've got a lens flare. You can adjust the intensity to suit, but I'm going to go with this default value of 1. And then depth of field, what I want to do is I want the distant dunes to be blurry, as if there's a sort of heat haze. So I'll tick the focal distance and the depth blur radius, and I'll make the distance 5,000 units, and then I'll up the depth blur, which applies after that focal distance, to 10. And you can see what happens is the foreground is still nicely in focus, but the dunes in the distance are blurred. Even the sun has enlarged and blurred as well. Okay, and there's all sorts of other things you could do in here. You could do vignettes and color grading, but I think I'm kind of finished for today. So let's do a final test. Let's go into play mode. And actually let's go full screen as well with F11. And you can see got a lovely contrast between the sort of orange of the desert and the blue sky. You can see in the distance the dunes are blurred because of that post-process blur I applied. I've got lens flare, and generally speaking it's looking pretty good. So that's where I'm going to finish off for today. I hope you found this useful. This is now a template for you to add whatever you want. You can add your own oases, desert towns, whatever you want. So have fun and stay subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.